Before the break, we were talking about a fundamental of marksmanship, and that is sight picture. And maybe a better way to approach this topic is for you to explain to the jury how you trained your officers, including Officer Pettis, to use their aiming system to acquire a target and accurately deliver a bullet.
The aiming system, the holographic sight that has a glass window, allows you a field of view, and superimposed in the middle of that glass field of view area is either a red dot or a green dot or a reticle, depending on what model you have. It's going to be no different as far as looking at your front sight instead of having the actual front sight on the firearm. You're going to be looking at the dot or the reticle. That is going to be your front sight. So sight picture is not going to change just because you have a optical system or an iron sights. You're still going to focus on the dot, on the reticle, making sure that is clear, and your target that you're aiming at will be slightly fuzzy, and that again is because of the way the eye is built. You're unable to focus three different things at once because of all the different distances.
So to be clear, the way you taught Officer Pettis, I should say the training officers with the Albuquerque Police Department, especially with the Albuquerque SWAT team, taught Officer Pettis that when looking through an aiming system, that the proper way to do that is to focus on the aiming reticle. Is that right?
That's correct. You would do the exact same thing with that optic and that reticle that you would do if you had the iron sights on the firearm.
And the way that you taught Officer Pettis to use his aiming system is that when looking, I guess, through the optical sighting system, that the target would be blurry.
Yes, to make an accurate shot, again, your focus has to be on the dot or the reticle, and the target will be slightly fuzzy.
Now, turning your attention to some other training topics, and that I'd like to talk about, what is follow-through with regards to firearms marksmanship? Follow-through
is all of the basics of marksmanship, all of the basics that you do to deliver an accurate shot at your target. Follow-through is the last step in marksmanship, and it's a continuation of all of the basics during and after the shot.
Now, there's a term called failure drill. What does that mean?
Failure drill, as taught by the Albuquerque Police Department, is a standard defensive response, and that is the officer engages the target twice, high center mass. He will assess. If he has not stopped the action, then he will fire a third round. So a failure drill,
I should say, Albuquerque Police Department officers are essentially taught that when essentially engaging a target, that they are to fire 3 rounds in the way that you described.
That's correct.
Now, there's this notion, I think you talked about it earlier, reactive targets versus non-reactive targets. What do you mean by that?
A reactive target will fall, it will move, it will change angles when the officer delivers proper marksmanship. He delivers accurate shots to that target. So when the officer engages the target with a standard defensive response, the 2 rounds, if they are good hits, the target then will fall out of play or move. Now, we can also set these targets to make the officer realize that not everything is going to always react how they expect. So the officer may engage the target with 2 good, accurate shots, but the target will remain. The officer then is trained to assess again and then perform a failure drill.
What are, again, what are decisional shooting drills?
They are targets. They are scenarios that we set up that have threat targets, non-threat targets, reactive targets. They are put into place in all of our training, entry training, firearm proficiency training, scenarios, role-playing.
Now, what is the expectation of the Albuquerque Police Department SWAT team officers, including Officer Pettis, with regard to how quickly they are to make assessments of whether a target should be shot or it shouldn't be shot?
We expect them to process that information and quickly make a decision.
Now, there are certain types of targets, and I believe we started that conversation earlier today, decisional shooting targets.
That's correct.
And there are certain targets that provide an officer with decisions they have to make about certain types of weapons being held by a suspect. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm going to show you what has been marked Officer Pettis' Exhibit F. And after you've had a chance to look at it, I'd like to ask you some questions about it.
Okay, sir.
Do you recognize the document that I have shown you and was marked Officer Pettis' Exhibit F?
I do.
What is it?
It is a decisional shooting target that is used during training.
When you say used during training, who uses this decisional shooting target in training?
The Albuquerque Police Department SWAT team.
Now, have you seen Officer Pettis engage this particular target, decisional shooting target, during his training?
I have.
Is Exhibit F a fair and accurate copy of the life-size targets that are used by the Albuquerque Police Department SWAT team to train its officers?
Yes, it is.
At this time, Your Honor, I'd like to offer Officer Pettis' Exhibit F into evidence. We will come back to the topic at hand, but first I'd like to ask you two different questions that are related to the incident. So moving away from training and putting yourself in the incident.
Okay.
Was the coming of darkness a factor in your assessment of the situation and what needed to happen?
Yes, it was a big factor. And again, I go based on previous activations in that area. I knew the terrain. I understood that based on the terrain and based on the open field that it would be difficult once it became dark to maintain that inner perimeter. And then just the factors that I had at hand to deliver any type of outside lighting source was going to be a problem.
Now, you had mentioned earlier about the Albuquerque Police Department having a limited number of night vision equipment, is that right?
That's correct.
What is your understanding about the availability of night vision equipment for the field officers who were there and the state police officers who were there?
I do not believe that any field officer has issued any kind of night vision unless they have purchased it on their own, but I have never heard of anybody doing that. And as far as state police, I highly doubt they would have any.
Okay. So, to the best of your knowledge, who would have had night vision equipment at this particular scene?
Tactical officers.
And that would be it?
That would be it.
And it would be limited to the 4 officers who were there on scene. Is that fair to say?
With the people that were there, it would be just limited to them.
Now, this is a different question on a different topic related to the incident. Why wasn't any plan put on hold until the crisis negotiation team was on scene?
I believe because the situation was fluid and it was rapidly moving. And again, as I arrived at the scene, I was attempting to slow it down, but it took a life of its own and just continued to evolve and rapidly change.
Now, would you agree that your simple presence at a scene does not prevent the suspect from acting the way the suspect chooses to act?
That is correct.
So that your presence on the scene can only have a limited effect if the suspect does not act before you can react.
That's correct.
So this incident could have essentially gone on longer, and the possibility exists that the crisis negotiations team could have been brought to the scene. Is that right?
That's correct.
But you were not in control of what the suspect's actions were.
That's absolutely correct.
And that prevented you from slowing down the situation to allow enough time to pass to ensure that the crisis negotiation team could show up on scene.
That's correct.
Now, we were talking about decisional shooting targets.
Yes.
Now, does the Albuquerque Police Department use a decisional shooting target that has a person who is armed with an edge weapon?
Yes, we do.
Would you please describe that decisional shooting target for the jury so that they can understand what that decisional shooting target looks like?
Sure. That type of target is from a company where they design those type of targets for law enforcement, and it is a photograph of an individual. The individual is standing in a fighting stance. He's squaring up, is how I would describe it, showing the behavioral cues that there's intent. In his hand is a edged weapon, going along with the means he has the ability to carry out that intent. And from the picture, he looks fully capable of delivering an attack, and he has the opportunity to do so.
Now, this is a two-dimensional target, is that right?
That's correct.
Now, how do you instruct your officers about the whole idea of opportunity, that when they encounter this particular decisional shooting target, whether the opportunity exists for there to be an immediate threat that would justify the use of deadly force?
Proximity.
Okay. So, in the way that you use this decisional shooting target, how is proximity essentially presented to a student, to an officer?
That the suspect and the target could deliver an attack before you could even react. He's close by. You're already, again, as we talked about the reactionary gap, the lag time, you are already behind the power curve.
So when you say close by, what distance are you referring to?
Proximity anywhere from 21 feet and in is threat proximity with a knife.
So is it fair to say that when Officer Pettis was presented with this target of an individual who is armed with an edged weapon, that it is the expectation of the Albuquerque Police Department SWAT team, given all the factors you've described, that it would be a shoot target?
Objection. On the unclearness of the question, if he's asking about the target that he described as opposed to Mr. Boyd, I have no objection. That's made clear.
Focusing on the decisional shooting target, focusing on the decisional shooting target, not the incident involving Mr. Boyd.
Right.
Would it be fair to say that it was expected of Officer Pettis that when encountering a man who had an edged weapon, who was squared off to the officer and was at a distance that was less than 21 feet, it was the expectation of the Albuquerque Police Department SWAT team that was a shoot scenario?
Yes.
And if Officer Pettis did not shoot, what consequence would he face if encountering this particular target in training?
Well, we don't give up on people who make mistakes. That's what training's for. We'd rather mistakes happen in training than out on the field. So again, we would pull that officer aside, Officer Perez, and we would discuss it. We would refer back to use of force, SOP, and we may run the scenario again.
So would you agree with me that, of course, this two-dimensional representation of a person who is squared up on the officer with an edged weapon is not in motion?
That's correct.
That's a stationary target.
That's a stationary target.
would you please explain to the jury why a stationary target, given the scenario that we've explained in training, why that's a shoot target as opposed to a don't shoot target, because the target isn't moving towards the officer?
Again, it comes to the capability. The individual in the photo has the capability of closing distance quickly. And mere proximity, close quarters, an attack can be formed at any moment. A surprise attack can happen without notice.
Now, that's consistent with the SOP,
That's correct.
and that's consistent with the training Officer Pett has received.
That's correct.
Now, I'd like to turn your attention away from the topic of training and then focus in on your initial assessment of what was taking place at 812 Piedra Vista in March of 2014. So I'd like to turn to that right now.
Okay.
Now, you had mentioned, I think, that you were at the mall when you received a phone call. Is that right?
That's correct.
And what exactly were you doing at the mall?
I was with my family on a Sunday,
Okay.
watching them shop.
Now, why were you called? You're like the rest of us. I hate to say it.
Got dragged along.
Oh, well, back in character, I suppose. So you were at the mall watching your family shop, is that right?
That's correct.
So why were you called on a day that seems like you had a day off?
Because in tactical, we're on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year long. And control will always notify a tactical supervisor of an incident they feel is starting to kind of escalate, or it's an incident that's critical, that's kind of outside the scope of like an everyday occurrence. So they'll give us a heads up, hey, would you please monitor the air? And it gives us a little bit of advance notice if something goes in a direction that requires us to respond.
So is it fair to say that control isn't actually activating the SWAT team? That's not something radio control can do, is that right?
That's correct. The only individuals at the time that could actually make a incident, a SWAT call, would be a sergeant or a lieutenant.
Within the tactical unit, is that right?
That's correct.
Now, other folks in the Albuquerque Police Department can request an activation, a field services officer, a sergeant, a lieutenant, but they can't actually activate the SWAT team.
That's correct. It requires the supervisor on scene to usually get the phone number of the tactical supervisor from control. They'll call the tactical supervisor, and then they will kind of run by, hey, this is what we have out at this scene. It is then up to the tactical supervisor to see if that fits the criteria of activating the team and making it an official SWAT call out.
So there came a time when you left the mall.
Yes,
Approximately what time was that?
maybe around 6 o'clock, around there.
Okay. Now, there came a point in time when you essentially went back home, obtained your police vehicle, is that right?
Yes,
And you were en route on the way there.
that's correct.
What did you do in order to find out more information about the incident to which you were responding?
I began starting to listen to the radio.
Okay. With regard to the computer-aided dispatch log, what did you do to educate yourself?
On the computer dispatch log, I started reading some of the comments.
Okay.
But I relied heavily because I was driving on basically the radio.
Okay. Now, how important are computer-aided dispatch comments to your assessment of this particular call?
They aid me in my intel and my assessment.
I'd like to show you an entry from Exhibit A, which is the CAD report, and I'd like to have, it's already in evidence, and I'd like to have you look at that, and I'd like to ask you if you considered this particular entry in your assessment of the incident to which you were responding.
Yes, that's correct.
So it's fair to say that you reviewed this particular CAD entry that we are showing to the jury now from Exhibit A. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, based on your training and experience, how did you assess the statement that James has an extensive criminal history of aggravated battery on peace officers in various jurisdictions, including Albuquerque?
I consider this to be a little bit of a higher threat level than most calls just because of the aggravated battery on a police officer.
Now, why did you assess the threat level in this particular call involving Mr. Boyd, in which there was aggravated battery against peace officers, differently than another individual who might just be charged with aggravated battery against a citizen?
From my training, or actually from my experience in law enforcement, if you're willing to commit aggravated battery on a police officer, then you're probably willing to commit aggravated battery on anybody. Whereas if I go to some calls and a member of the public has committed aggravated battery on another subject of the public, it doesn't mean that he's going to go out and start battering other members of the public. It might have been that he just had some kind of disagreement with that individual. But when you're battering a police officer, that pretty much tells me that everybody's fair game.
Now, with regard to the extensive criminal history of aggravated battery, what did that tell you about Mr. Boyd's willingness not to just simply commit that crime against one law enforcement officer, but to commit them, I guess, at least more than twice?
I figured he would, his history showed that he would probably do it again.
Has it been your experience that the best predictor of a suspect's behavior is relevant previous behavior?
Yes.
And that you would agree with me that knowing that Mr. Boyd had an extensive criminal history of aggravated battery on peace officers in various jurisdictions, including Albuquerque, that this was the best predictor of what Mr. Boyd's future behavior would be?
Yes, it was.
Now, there's a statement here that says that it has been reported that he, meaning Mr. Boyd, is a paranoid schizophrenic. Do you see that?
I do.
In assessing the call that you were responding to, how did the paranoid schizophrenic remark help you understand what was taking place?
It was going to compound the problem that we had already, based on the history, and then now based on his mental illness. It was going to make this incident extremely difficult.
What is it about, based on your training and experience, what is it about mental illness that makes a call more difficult to handle when dealing with someone with a mental illness than someone who is not mentally ill?
The unpredictableness. They were unpredictable, and then a lot of times it comes down to the negotiations. It's sometimes, most of the time, more complicated to negotiate with somebody with mental illness.
Now, there's been mention in your examination, both and in direct examinations particularly, and that is that yet you have all the time in the world to negotiate. Do you remember being asked questions around that topic?
That's correct.
That you basically you have unlimited amount of time to spend in negotiations. Does that sound about right?
At times, yes.
Now, is that actually true? Does the Albuquerque Police Department's SWAT team spend an unlimited amount of time trying negotiations?
If there are steps that are working in a positive direction, we will spend as much time as needed.
What happens if no progress is being made? How does tactical address those situations?
Then we usually get together with the crisis negotiation team, get together with a psychologist, and we try to come up with a plan to either divert their attention off of a subject that they can't stop talking about that's not based in reality, to bring them back into conversation with a negotiator. But we usually confirm with somebody in crisis negotiations.
So there comes a point in time, if negotiations aren't moving in a positive direction, that the tactical unit intervenes.
Yes,
And a show of force may be used.
if needed.
Distraction devices may be used if needed.
Yes,
And then there will be an occasion in which, if those diversions and distractive devices don't work, that you will increase the level of force being used against a person. Is that right?
that's correct.
How does that happen?
It's based again on a layered response. A layered response and using all the different tools that we have to incapacitate the subject and successfully end the situation.
Now, when you have an individual who has criminal charges, and in this particular case, Mr. Boyd having a charge of aggravated battery against a peace officer, will there ever be a time that that the Albuquerque Police Department SWAT team won't take that suspect into custody?
No, I can't think of any offhand.
So it's fair to say that the end goal when dealing with someone who has criminal charges is to take them into custody. Is that right?
That's correct, based on the crime committed, yes.
And peaceably if you can.
Yes,
But you will end up using force if the person who's to be arrested refuses to cooperate and give up peaceably. Is that right?
that's correct.
Now, there's also a statement here that I'd like you to ask you about. Use extreme caution when contacting James. Based on your experience and training, what did that signify to you and the call that you were responding to? Those words, use extreme caution when contacting James.
That means that we are dealing with a dangerous subject.
Now, en route, I understand you spoke with K-9 Officer Ken Ronzone, is that right?
That's correct.
And how did you contact Ken Ronzone?
Over the telephone.
And what did you learn from Ken Ronzone about I should back up. Where was Ken Ronzone when he talked to you?
I believe he had just arrived or was en route.
Okay. And what did you learn from Ken Ronzone about the incident involving Mr. Boyd?
He informed me that officers who originally were dispatched to the call had arrived and had been threatened by Mr. Boyd while he was holding two knives. He believed that the charges at the time, and based on what he was telling me, I agreed, were going to be aggravated assault charges with a deadly weapon. He also made comments to these officers that he was going to kill them.
Now, I believe in your direct examination you were asked questions to the effect, did you know that the officers either drew their weapons first on Mr. Boyd before he drew his knife? Do you remember questions about that?
I do.
Now, during the entire time that you were en route to the scene and when you were on the scene, did anyone ever tell you that it was open space officers who drew their weapons before Mr. Boyd drew his knives?
No.
If you had heard that, how would you have assessed that information in making your determination about the dangerousness of Mr. Boyd?
I would then have to get more information from the supervisor regarding that. And I would assess it as being extremely dangerous, that just their presence and their show of force from the officers did nothing to de-escalate Mr. Boyd. He did not comply or surrender, but instead armed himself, which kind of ramped it up a little bit.
So let me see if I understand your testimony correctly. If Officers Hernandez and Officer McDaniel, the open space officers who were there, had essentially drawn their weapons and then Mr. Boyd drew his knife, you would actually think that that's a much more dangerous situation than the situation that was actually described to you.
Yes.
And the reason for that is that this high-end show of force by these officers simply caused Mr. Boyd to threaten them with an edged weapon.
Yes.
And had you known that information, it'd be fair to say that you would have assessed Mr. Boyd to be even more dangerous than the information you actually knew about him.
Yes.
I believe you also spoke to one of your tactical officers named Anthony Sedler, is that right?
That's correct.
Where was Anthony Sedler when you spoke to him?
He informed me that he was en route to the call. He had heard it on the radio.
And what did you learn from Officer Anthony Sedler?
I didn't learn anything else prior to him getting to the scene. And then I talked to him more when I was at the scene and the command post area, and I found out kind of what position on the perimeter he was at.
Okay. Now, it would be fair to say that you find out information about the scene and where everyone is deployed in a piecemeal fashion.
That's correct.
There's no one there waiting to tell you all the information you need to know.
No, not at the time.
That all the folks, or all the officers who were there on the scene, were essentially focused on the task at hand, that is, addressing Mr. Boyd,
That's correct.
and that it would not be appropriate to just pull everyone down and ask them for a complete summary of everything that happened.
No, I wouldn't be able to pull everybody down and then redeploy them.
Okay. So it's fair to say that the process that you undergo requires you, it will have holes in the amount of information that you receive,
Yes,
because you can't talk to everyone.
that's correct.
And instead, you need to rely upon conversations that you have with your fellow officers,
Correct.
but you can't talk to everyone.
No,
Now, there came a time when you spoke with Sergeant Jason Carpenter, I understand. Is that right?
that's correct.
When did you have a conversation with him in terms of your arrival?
I believe I was I think I was still en route to my house from the mall.
Okay. What did Sergeant Carpenter tell you about the incident that was happening out in the open space?
He let me know that there was a couple canines at the scene, that they were negotiating with Mr. Boyd, and that they could handle the situation.
Now, why did you continue to essentially go to your house, obtain your equipment, obtain your vehicle, and change for this incident when you had the field services officer or sergeant telling you that they were handling it just fine?
Well, because Control had called me, and usually Control won't call, and they'll call even when there is a field supervisor at a scene handling it, but Control is trained to look at that scene and realize maybe a little bit more, so they then get a hold of a tactical supervisor so we can monitor the air. And then my call to Officer Ronzone, he informed me of a little bit more of what they had there, and then I found out that one of my officers, Officer Jeff McFarland, was already arrived.
Now, what did you think of Sergeant Jason Carpenter's statement that, you know, they were handling the call properly and that SWAT activation wasn't necessary?
I was concerned, but his confidence level, and I know him to be a good sergeant, I gave him kind of the benefit of the doubt, and I didn't start right away.
Okay. Now, while en route, I understand that you requested additional units.
That's correct.
And when I say additional units, I mean other officers. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, it is.
Now, you contacted James Purdue because he was a high ground officer.
That's correct.
You contacted Officer Ornalis because he is your team leader.
Yes,
And as a team leader, he has an informal leadership role.
that's correct.
Officer Ornalis is the same rank as Officer Purdue and Officer Pettis, but nonetheless, given the structure of the Albuquerque Police Department SWAT team, Officer Ornalis can essentially direct the activities of other officers who are essentially at his grade.
Yes, he is. He's able to do that.
Officer Pettis was chosen by you to respond to this call.
That's correct.
And how did you communicate with Officer Pettis?
I give him a call on the phone.
What did you learn about what Officer Pettis was doing at the time he received the phone call?
I believe he was over at family's house on the Sunday afternoon.
Okay. So Officer Pettis was not working,
He was not.
but you called him nonetheless.
I did.
What resistance, if any, did Officer Pettis give you about leaving a family function and joining you on this call?
Not one bit of resistance.
Now, you learned more about about Mr. Boyd's current charges, I believe, at 6:33. Now, this is once again a statement from Officer Pettis's Exhibit A, and I'd like for you to take a moment to look at it.
Okay.
Do you recall reviewing this particular statement made in Officer Pettis's Exhibit A, which is the CAD history?
Yes, that's correct.
Based on what is displayed here, what did you take away from the nature of the incident you were responding to?
It added to the information that Officer Renzone gave me over the telephone, based that the arriving officers had made contact with Mr. Boyd. Mr. Boyd refused to show his hands, at which time the officers were concerned about weapons, wanted to pat him down. Mr. Boyd then produced 2 knives and made comments in police lingo of 27-1, which is basically homicide or kill.
Now, I understand that you also heard the radio dispatch from which this particular CAD history was developed, or I should say prepared. Is that right?
That's correct.
You would agree with me that that statement was made by K-9 Officer Ken Ronzone?
That's correct.
And how do you know that from simply looking at the CAD?
With his call sign.
And if you would you please show the jury what on the CAD report is Officer Ronzone's call sign?
756.
So, and you know that to be Officer Ronzone.
I do.
At this time, Your Honor, I believe you've already ruled that the Albuquerque Police Department radio dispatch tape is meets the business record exception to the rule against hearsay. There was also foundation given by Officer or Detective Jess Stone, and this witness has testified that he heard this particular statement. So I'd like to be able to play Officer Pettis's Exhibit C2, which is the APD radio dispatch tape, along with the running transcript, which is Exhibit D2 of the radio dispatch tape. And I'd like to play from C2, the time would be 26 minutes and 27 seconds to 27 minutes and 9 seconds. And as for the transcript, it would be page 27, line 16, through page 27, line 25.
756 to 754, and then you're responding unit 25, one of the primary units. Officers contacted the subject. Subject was non-compliant, refusing to show his hands. When officers attempted to contact him and pat him down, he pulled one knife out and threatened him in a threatening manner. Also made threats to kill him. Subject is armed with at least 2 knives, at which point probably open and in his front pockets, and he's put them on once.
Now, in that radio call, there is a statement 756 to 754 and any responding units. Do you remember hearing that?
Yes.
What does that mean?
When you start off a radio transmission to 756 to 754, you're starting that out to let 754, hey, this information is important and it's directly going to affect you. But I also need other units in the area to hear it. So that's why he calls out 756 to 754 and any other responding units. 754 now is aware that this is important information I need to know.
Who is 754?
It's going to be Officer Scott Weimerskirch.
Now I'm going to turn your attention to a different topic, and that is the staging by the Albuquerque Fire Department. At this time, Your Honor, I would like to play Exhibit C2, which is the APD radio tape, time 24 minutes and 23 seconds to 24 minutes and 47 seconds. And with regard to Exhibit D, the transcript, page 25, line 18 through page 26, line 3.
Albuquerque Fire Department to APD Command. Do you have a designated location for us? At 2 p.m. we will monitor that copper and Turner.
In Kentworth, so the staging area will be at Copper and Turner.
Albuquerque Fire Department update copy, copper and Turner.
Why does the Albuquerque Police Department call the Albuquerque Fire Department to respond to incidents like the one involving Mr. Boyd?
Because of the danger level of some calls, we already stage, or we try to stage, the Albuquerque Fire Department close by. So if any medical aid is needed, they're right there.
Well, aren't officers trained in first aid?
Very basic.
Okay. Why do you choose to have the Albuquerque Fire Department paramedic as opposed to having a first aid trained officer administer first aid to anyone who needs it?
Just because they're highly trained in it, they're more advanced trained. They're the experts in that medical profession.
Based on your understanding of the area, how far away was the Albuquerque Fire Department staged away from the location where Mr. Boyd was positioned?
They were staged right at it had been the trailhead at Copper, and there is a service road, and the trailhead at Copper is going to be basically just south of my location, where the command post is, south of where the officers are at. And there is a service road that the Albuquerque Fire Department can use from the Copper location on the trailhead, and they can drive to our location, and I believe it's only about 100 yards.
Now, upon your arrival at the open space, what did you learn about the terrain?
Just as I expected from my experience out there and training out there, that it was going to be extremely difficult, rugged. There was going to be elevated positions, depressed areas. Again, I had the concern of citizen safety. There were people enjoying the trails due to it was a Sunday afternoon, nice weather.
How many just members of the public did you see out in the open space?
I say about a handful. I saw maybe 4 or 5, 6. I had so much going on, I'm sure there were more or maybe less, but I remember seeing some coming down.
Now, how would you characterize, once you saw it, how would you characterize the location where Mr. Boyd was located?
He was in an elevated position. I would consider it a position of advantage.
Why is that an important assessment to determining whether the incident should become a SWAT activation or not?
A position of advantage, you're able to see all of the locations of the officers. A position of advantage is almost, in the terms, almost like a barricaded subject. You're in a position, you're in an area where it's going to be extremely difficult to perform any kind of a tactical operation. Even street officers, it's going to be difficult just based on the environmental conditions and the equipment we have.
Now, if I understand it correctly, during your direct testimony, you stated that this was you assessed this as a barricaded suspect call. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the example I gave Sergeant Carpenter. I said, think of this as a barricaded subject, just minus the walls of a house. You have the rugged terrain, which takes the place of those walls, and an elevated position.
So do you fault Officer, or I should say Sergeant Carpenter, with the fact that he did not assess Mr. Boyd's location as you did, that is, that Mr. Boyd was in a barricaded position?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what his assessment was. But
Now,
that's why I kind of explained it to him, and after I explained it to him, he agreed.
okay. Now, you would agree with me that Sergeant Carpenter did not have the training and experience that you had on the department?
That's correct.
You've been, at that particular time, you'd been on the department approximately 19 years, is that right?
Yes,
Okay. And Sergeant Carpenter was younger than you,
I believe so.
probably a good 10, 15 years younger than you.
Good possibility.
Now, so the simple fact that Sergeant Carpenter didn't assess the location where Mr. Boyd was located the same way you did, it makes a certain amount of sense, doesn't it? Because he didn't have the training and experience that you did.
Yes, and I believe he was a new sergeant at the time, and so his experience was not at the level, or maybe he didn't realize some of the resources he was able to get to a scene, unlike someone who is a senior sergeant or had time supervising or in a position in the field where you've been on for a while.
Now, when exactly did you make the decision to turn this field services call into a SWAT activation?
I started making the moves to make this a SWAT activation once I got to the scene, made contact with Sergeant Carpenter. I then assessed what I had in the backyard and looked to see where Mr. Boyd was at. And at that point, I started going towards that decision of actually activating the rest of the team.
Now, in terms of the time, I guess, if you were to relate it to the time the shots were fired and Mr. Boyd was shot, how long before that shooting did you make the assessment that this should become, the incident with Mr. Boyd, should become a SWAT activation?
So when I first got there, I spent a little bit of time, very little, talking to Sergeant Carpenter, then assessing the terrain and kind of the perimeter. So from that point, when I decided this actually needs to be a SWAT activation, maybe 10 minutes, 8 minutes.
So just to be very clear, that approximately 8 to 10 minutes before the shooting happened with Mr. Boyd, you made the determination that this incident should become a SWAT activation.
Yes.
Is it fair to say that that places us at about 7:20?
Yes, or a little after, yes.
Now, you would agree with me that just because you have labeled it and had essentially wanted to make this into a SWAT activation, that's something that doesn't happen immediately. Is that right?
If I have the time, it can happen immediately. But based on what I observed at the scene, I needed to have a few things in place prior to making that activation.
So are you saying that you did not activate the SWAT team before the shooting happened?
That's correct.
Okay. So you had made the decision that you were going to activate the SWAT team, but circumstances prevented you from doing so until after the shooting had happened.
That's correct. There are certain steps of importance. There are certain tasks that you look at and you categorize them in levels of importance. The inner perimeter was important. And do the inner perimeter officers have enough bodies on each position? Do they have less lethal? Those type of things need to be taken care of first, because you have citizen safety you have to worry about. If I don't have a good inner perimeter, or I don't know what's going on in the inner perimeter, then everything else has kind of gone by the wayside, and we're not looking at a good success.
So first things first, you had to determine that the inner perimeter was sound.
That's correct.
And that's more important than activating the SWAT team.
At the time, yes.
Yes. And you would agree with me that making sure that the outer perimeter is sound is more important than activating the SWAT team.
Yes, that's going to be a huge issue.
Those are two critical tasks.
Yes.
And those two critical tasks had to be completed before you can activate the SWAT team.
Yeah, the outer perimeter, it can take a little bit longer while I activate the team. I mean, the outer perimeter is you're always building on the outer perimeter just because there are so many streets and intersections and things that arise. So an outer perimeter is constantly being modified. So I give that to Sergeant Carpenter to worry about. And then once I have enough time, and I believe I'm getting enough bodies to different positions and tools, that allows me to, what I believe at the time, to take enough time to make the page to activate the rest of the team.
Upon your arrival, what was your assessment of the inner perimeter?
I wasn't sure where everybody was at on the inner perimeter, and that's why I had to take the time to figure out if there was enough bodies, again, tools. I had to contact the arrest team, entry team, and I found out that they needed more bodies there. They needed a beanbag shotgun. So taking care of the needs of the inner perimeter team, I had to kind of start from scratch just so I knew where everybody was at. And again, I'm responsible for everybody on the inner perimeter team. Even if they don't work in tactical, once I come on scene, I'm still responsible for those individuals. And we have an outside agency there, New Mexico State Police. Now I am responsible for their welfare.
Now, you talked about in your direct testimony that you would replace inner perimeter field services officers or other officers with SWAT team members. Is that right?
That's correct. That's usually what happens on a SWAT activation is the field is holding inner perimeter positions, and they hold those positions until relieved by officers from the tactical unit that are arriving on scene.
You would agree with me that you did not have enough time to or personnel to relieve the inner perimeter officers who were there addressing Mr. Boyd at the time you arrived.
With tactical officers?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't have enough tactical officers.
So when you arrived, you realized you had to leave the inner perimeter officers in place because you did not have sufficient tactical team or SWAT team officers to pull them back.
That's correct.
Now, you took certain steps to strengthen the outer perimeter, is that right?
Most of that was given to Sergeant Carpenter.
And were you comfortable with the decisions made by Sergeant Carpenter with regards to the way that he essentially managed the outer perimeter?
I didn't really pay too much attention to how he was handling that, just because of my attention being directed at the rapidly ongoing fluid situation that I had with Mr. Boyd.
Now, turning your attention to Officer Pettis and the fateful decision that you made to send Officer Pettis up to the location where Mr. Boyd was located, why did you, with what orders or commands did you send Officer Pettis up to, join the inner perimeter?
He arrived at the scene, and I told him that the arrest team or entry team, Officer Weimerskirch's team, needed more bodies. Could you go to that direction? Could you go into that position?
In what capacity was Officer Pettis ordered by you to join the inner perimeter?
I gave him an order to go to that position to assist them.
Okay. When you say assist, as communicated by a SWAT team sergeant to Officer Pettis, what does it mean to tell Officer Pettis, go assist the inner perimeter?
Again, that's what's nice about tactical officers and working together is I don't have to have a long dialogue with him and waste time back at the command post of what I expect from him or what I need him to do. He's been trained. He's already had decision-making that I've observed on other calls and call-outs that he's going to go to that position and he's going to fill in quickly whatever position that needs to be filled in, whatever tool that needs to be picked up or used, whatever it may be. A lot of it's going to be nonverbal. He's mature enough to look at that and make those decisions.
Would it be fair to say that when you sent Officer Pettis up to the inner perimeter, Officer Pettis was tasked with the responsibility of serving as a cover officer?
Yes.
And when Officer Pettis was sent by you to serve as a cover officer, what were your expectations of Officer Pettis if he encountered a situation in which Mr. Boyd posed an immediate threat of serious bodily harm to one of the officers in the inner perimeter?
Deadly force.
How was this expectation communicated to Officer Pettis prior to this incident?
Again, it's department SOP, use of force section. It's the training. It is the expectations we place on all tactical officers, and it goes back to the basic training. You are a cover officer. You're expected to be scene security. You're expected to keep people safe.
Would it be fair to say that you in no way limited or somehow curtailed or or modified those expectations when you sent Officer Pettis up to the location where the inner perimeter was set?
No, I did not.
Now, we've talked about an arrest team during the course of your direct examination, and I believe you described how both an entry and an arrest team work. Is that right?
Yes,
Now, you would agree with me that officers who are not tactical officers perform arrests every day.
that's correct.
And many times, officers perform arrests when they're by themselves. Just he or she conducts an investigation and arrests the suspect without the assistance of any backup or cover officer. Is that right?
It occurs, yes.
And you would agree with me that when an officer makes a decision to go hands-on, that is, place a suspect into custody, they have to close the distance.
That's correct.
An arrest cannot be completed without a suspect, or I should say, without an officer closing the distance between an officer and the person who's to be arrested.
That's correct.
That happens in every single arrest.
Every single arrest.
And that there is an expectation that when officers are to perform an arrest, that they will close the distance and take someone into custody.
That's correct.
So when you have an arrest team, you would agree with me that sometimes that field services officers and other other officers simply don't have the luxury of having enough people to divide tasks in such a way where there's only one person to devote it to one task.
That's correct.
And you would agree with me that, for example, field services officers often have to multitask in situations involving arrests.
Yes.
And even when you have two officers, those officers essentially have to multitask in taking a suspect into custody.
That's correct.
And when a suspect is resisting arrest, you could have a group of officers take a suspect and you might have to require several officers to take a suspect into custody.
Yes.
And that's something that field services officers do every day.
Every day.
So just simply because you're a tactical officer, that doesn't mean that you're the only ones who take people or who take suspects into custody.
That's correct, yes.
In fact, that's something that you see field services officers do every day.
Every day.
Now, there were, as this incident was unfolding, you were listening to the radio, is that correct?
That's correct.
And I understand that you essentially began radio communications with Officer Weimerskirch.
Yes, my communication with him started right as I was trying to find a good approach route to the scene.
Now, with the court's permission, I would like to play a portion of Exhibit C2, which is the APD radio tape, time 33:22 to 33:25, along with Exhibit D2, which is the transcript. That would be page 33, line 20 through 24.
No objection, Your Honor.
PD just advised, the subject's still highly irate, refusing to come down, talks about possibly killing officers, and making other 10-point comments.
You, in fact, heard that radio dispatch when you were there at the open space.
As I was arriving en route, yes.
Now, what did Officer, and again, you know from having worked with Officer Weimerskirch, you recognize his voice.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what you heard on that radio tape is, in fact, Officer Weimerskirch.
It is.
Okay, and that's a person who you've heard over the radio for years.
For years. And he has a distinct, deep voice, so I knew for sure who that was.
Now, upon hearing Officer Weimerskirch tell you what he said over the radio, what did that tell you about the nature of the threat that Officer Weimerskirch was handling or perceiving?
It was an elevated threat.
Now, there also came additional statements made by Officer Weimerskirch over the radio.
Okay, excuse me, Your Honor, I'm wondering if you can find 1040 comments. I think it was 1040 comments. Sure.
Would you please define the 1040 comment, or I should say, so in Officer Weimerskirch's dispatch, he made the statement, making other 1040 comments. Do you remember hearing that?
I do.
What does that mean?
Again, that's police jargon. It's the 10 code. we use it to keep, again, dialogue quick and short on the air. 1040 usually means mental patient, mental illness.
How, in assessing the dangerousness of a suspect, when you're hearing from Officer Weimerskirch that Mr. Boyd is talking about possibly killing officers and at the same time also making 1040 or comments that might be attributed to mental illness, how do you assess those two facts when making a determination about the danger that's involved in this case?
It's a bad situation. It's one of the worst situations on a critical incident, and it concerned me about a successful resolution.
Now I'd like to turn your attention to another radio dispatch made by Officer Weimerskirch. With the court's permission, I would like to play Exhibit C2, the APD radio tape. Time 35 minutes, 55 seconds to 36 minutes, 33 seconds, along with the transcript, Exhibit D2, which is page 36, line 3 through 18.
If there's no objection. I'm looking just a second, Your Honor. No objection, Your Honor. You may.
754.
754.
Negotiations started very productive, and just you have 7 10s on there.
8277.
Good. 7 10, go ahead. Not getting anywhere with any negotiations with them. Highly agitated, making 1040 comments, and we're to lose daylight. And you two are still being your phone, recording all the way to your cars. Subject had a knife in his right hand, put it back in his pocket.
Now I'd like to be able to show the transcript that was just shown to the jury as like that. And I'd like to ask you some questions about your assessment of the information that Officer Weimerskirch was giving to you. Now, on line 5, you see beginning on line 5, you see negotiations still aren't productive.
I do.
Now, what does that tell you about what effect Officer Weimerskirch and his negotiations are having on Mr. Boyd?
They're not going well.
Now, you see the other statement that says there, and could see if 710 is on the air. Do you see that?
I do.
Who is 710?
That is my call sign.
Now, in your experience, having worked with Officer Weimerskirch over years, why is a canine officer asking for you?
Because he's concerned of the situation, and he is now directing the scene towards me and making a decision and helping him out.
In your experience, having worked with Officer Weimerskirch, why didn't he simply ask over the air for Sergeant Carpenter to respond to his request?
Objection is speculation, Your Honor.
Okay.
The way it's phrased, in his experience, if he has any.
In my experience, I believe that based on working with Scott Weimerskirch for years, he knows what a SWAT activation is and what should be a SWAT activation, and I think he realized that this had all of the elements that needed to be a SWAT activation and to go in that direction. And so then he begins directing all of his transmissions towards me, assuming that now this is going to be a SWAT call.
So just to be crystal clear, when Officer Weimerskirch asked for you, Sergeant Fox, over the air, you took it to mean that Officer Weimerskirch realized that this needed to be a SWAT activation.
Yes, that's what I would assume, since he didn't call for Sergeant Carpenter.
And then there's a statement that, again, there's a statement, and we're going to lose daylight. Do you see that?
I do.
How did you interpret that statement, and what steps did you take to address it?
Again, I was concerned, just based on my experience and training out in that area, that without daylight, it was going to make the scene that much more difficult. And whatever the entry team was staged, because I wasn't sure, or wherever the arrest team was staged, they're seeing something that I'm not. And if they're concerned about the daylight, then that tells me that, yes, my assessment or my beliefs that this is going to be difficult without daylight are proven right.
Now, at line 17 and 18, you heard Officer Weimer-Skirt say, subject had a knife in his right hand, put it back in his pocket. What does that tell you about the volatility of Mr. Boyd?
That he's making no effort to comply with police officers. He's making no effort, in my assessment, to de-escalate the situation.
Now, as we're moving into the final phases of the standoff with Mr. Boyd, it's fair to say that he's not complying with commands.
That's correct.
Now, at this time, Your Honor, I would like to play another portion of the radio tape, Exhibit C2, time 44 minutes 11 seconds to 45 minutes and 54 seconds, and also play or show Exhibit D, which is the transcript, and that would be page 43, line 8, through page 45, line 2.
Sorry, can you give me that again?
43, line 8, through 45, line 2.
No objection, Your Honor.
The subject said he wants to get his bags and walk down beside compliant, won't disarm himself. We do have a plan in place if he comes towards us. 10-4. I'll go ahead and stay on the radio and he's making movements at this time. County 3, will you call on his movement for me? I'll work to if I can get additional bodies up here. I've got 2. I'll send them up to you. Is it going to be okay if I send them straight up to you, or do they need to go any certain direction? Straight up, he's talking about grabbing his bags and coming down, which is not going to be compliant with any commands to be taken into custody. How's that for? Do you have enough left report there? That's 10-4. We're just going to try to keep him occupied and have a plan taken into custody. Okay, do you have enough left report there? So the subject has changed clothing. He's now wearing a gray sweatshirt. It's pretty thick clothing. Looks like it's a hamper. He got a taser. And the 5-4. 5-4. I know we got an answer. Do we have enough left report there? Negative. We can have an impact. Let's see. Okay, I'll send the taser shotgun up to you. Sorry, I haven't seen the shotgun. We need a feedback. Yeah, we're going to need it quick. Jump on. But we will need it.
I'd like to begin our review of what was said over the radio. Again, displaying portions of the transcript that was just shown to you. And there's the first statement on page 43, line 11 through 13 of Exhibit D2. Do you see that?
I do.
What does it say?
Subject says he wants to get his bags, walk down, but is not compliant. He will not disarm himself.
What concerns did it raise in your mind that Mr. Boyd had made a decision to walk down?
Officer safety and citizen safety.
Now, why couldn't the inner perimeter officers just simply let Mr. Boyd walk down with his bags?
Again, because of safety reasons with the public, and then that negates any reason for having an inner perimeter. The inner perimeter is to keep the situation inside, not allow it to now grow or affect other areas.
What problems does it pose for the law enforcement officers who were out there on that mountainside to allow Mr. Boyd to go mobile, that is, move from his location to another location?
And then you have a problem of a moving perimeter, and it is a disaster. You have limited verbal communication. You have the possibilities of crossfires, and officers are no longer in control of the scene. We are now just reacting to his action.
Why is it better or proper police procedure to keep the subject, Mr. Boyd, contained within the inner perimeter?
Again, because we are in control, we are able to keep the other areas safe. We are able to look at our backdrops as far as if we have to engage the subject with lethal force, we're not have a house or we don't have any type of citizen behind us. It's for our safety and mostly for the public safety.
Now, turning your attention back to the screen, and I couldn't highlight the entire thing, nor should I, but there's a statement right below the highlighted section at line 13. Do you see that?
I do.
Now, is it true that you heard Officer Weimerskirch say over the radio, we do have a plan in place if he comes towards us? Do you see that?
I do.
Now, what concerns did you have, if any, about Officer Weimerskirch's statement that we have a plan in place if he comes towards us?
I'm concerned that he has enough resources, and that's why I ask him about, do you have enough tools? What do you need? I can tell by his voice and working around him for so long that whatever is going on up there that I can't see is becoming increasingly more difficult to handle, becoming more of a threat.
Now, you said because you've worked with him, what is it in his voice that you're hearing?
He's talking faster than he had previously in the radio transmissions. And that, when I ask him a question, sometimes he's unable to answer or does not answer. Now, that could be just based on the limitations of the radio in that area. It was bad reception, but it concerned me that some of the questions I asked, and then I didn't get a direct answer. I realized, okay, I probably need to stay off the air because he has a lot going on.
So your decision to stay off the air was to give Officer Weimerskirch essentially free air. That way he could communicate to you his concerns as opposed to you simply asking him questions.
Correct, and that allows Officer Purdue to also feed me intel. So I will get more out of staying off the air than clogging it up with useless dialogue while they have a situation going on.
Maybe this is a question that we haven't addressed adequately. So is it fair to say that two people can't speak over the radio channels that you have at one time?
That's correct.
So only one person can be on the air at any given time.
That's correct.
It's not like a telephone.
That's correct.
So that if one person is speaking, someone else who has something that they need to broadcast over the air may not be able to say it until after the first person is done.
Right.
And that's why you wanted to stay off the air.
Exactly.
Now, there's another statement that you make, I should say, there's another statement that you hear, and that is that at this time, 22, will you call out his movement for me? Who is 22?
Officer James Purdue.
Now, there's another statement that's at line 19. Do you see that?
I do.
It says 5:10 to 5:4 to 10. If you can get additional bodies up here, do you see that?
I do.
Now that was Officer Weimerskirch asking you to send additional officers.
That's correct.
What did that tell you about the nature of the situation that was unfolding in a location where you couldn't see?
That it is becoming a bigger threat and it's growing, and now he needs additional bodies up there to help him out.
Now, how did you respond to Officer Weimerskirch's request to send additional bodies up here?
I informed him I had two that have arrived, and I'll send them up.
Who were those two?
Officer Perez and Officer Ramon Ornelas.
Now, then you asked Officer Weimerskirch a question, and that begins at line 22. Is it going to be okay if I send them straight up to you, or do they need to go any certain direction? Do you see that?
I do.
Now again, apologize if I didn't read it just perfectly, but that's about right, isn't it?
That is correct.
Now, why did you ask Officer Weimerskirch that question?
when you're in charge of a scene, once again, and you start deploying officers, I may not be right there able to see everything or have a God's eye view of the scene. So I have no idea if I send them one direction, are they going to be passing any type of threat? Or if I send them that direction, is it going to be based on the terrain? Are they going to be unable to get to that position? So I go directly with someone who is already in that position because they've already scouted the area, they've already seen the footing, they've already figured out a safe route. So I go to him directly and ask him, can I send these two officers straight to you, or do they need to come up to another direction? Because still at the same time, I'm not real sure exactly where they're at, but I'm sure if you get closer, that they'll be able to tell or be able to guide him in.
Now, is it fair to say that at this particular time you're relying on Officer Weimerskirch to make decisions about who you're sending up?
No, he had no decision on who I was going to send up.
Maybe I apologize if that was a bad question.
No.
Are you relying upon the information that Officer Weimerskirch is giving you to make the decision of sending Officer Ornelas and Officer Pettis up to the scene?
I am.
So Officer Weimerskirch, his request for additional bodies is the reason that you sent Officer Pettis to the inner perimeter.
That's correct.
I'm
It's a
looking,
good time for a break.
that would work.
Should probably take a lunch break.
Yes.
I'll ask the jurors to report at 10 after